So once you get into business with the mob, it's hard to get out of business with the mob, right? So
Yeah.
I'm a bank teller in the Acapulco branch of Bital Bank, which I believe is what the name of the bank they acquired. And someone,
Well, they called it. They renamed it HSBC.
so a guy walks in with $50,000 in cash. He makes the suggestion that it's in my best interest to accept this deposit.
He makes the suggestion in a rather crude way, which is they would often, when they got to the counter, they would literally flash up in the palm of their hand picture of the teller's boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, their children. And that was a clear signal. We know who you are. We know where you live. And in Mexico, there's a phrase, you may have heard this phrase, it's called the silver or the lead. And the silver is you take the money. The lead is if you don't, you take a bullet. And so the choice facing a lot of these poor bank employees who were terrified. I mean, they were in they knew exactly what they were dealing with and who these people were. But, you have to remember that the cartels, particularly in that part of Mexico, are completely endemic. They are so embedded in, and they are petrified. I mean, the murder rate was huge, and they would murder freely just as a warning to others, almost like a marketing tool. And so they're petrified. And then the other thing, I mean, just so we're under no illusion, and no one was under any illusion what was happening, Chapo, who's a very resourceful character. I mean, Chapo's whole career is characterized by amazing audacity. He escaped from prison twice. He had a tunnel dug under his cell that was a mile long with air conditioning and railway tracks and lighting. I mean, this is one hell of a guy. And he realized that the whole process of depositing the money was taking too long. And it was also risky because people, if you see a man or a woman walking across the square with a bag and it looks like they've got cash in it, well, they're a risk. So, they could be robbed themselves. So he had measured and had made special pouches or boxes that actually fitted directly under the teller's windows to speed up the whole process. And the teller, all they had to do effectively was weigh the bag or weigh the box, and then they were on their way. And the whole thing, depositing large amounts, took literally seconds. And they literally have the chit ready and the receipt and everything, and just like that, gone. And then, but even that wasn't enough. It still gave Chapo a headache because by law in Mexico, a Mexican bank account has to be in pesos. And the peso is not an international currency. It's not solid currency. The currency that everyone wants is the dollar. And Chapo, as I said earlier, he's running a huge organization. People have to be paid. He's got children to educate. He's got houses to buy. He's got cars. He's got yachts. He had 2 private zoos with panthers in. His pride and joy was an albino tiger.
Sure.
He had to buy aircraft, submarines. So how do you do that? You pay for them with dollars. You don't pay for them with pesos. You don't pay in cash. You can't educate your children. You can't turn up at a school with a bag full of cash to pay the school fees. That's not how it works. So, and you can't buy a house that way. So he needed to get his peso accounts into dollars, and HSBC made available. I'm not saying they sat down with Chapo and discussed his options, but it was obvious, as I repeat to everybody, what was occurring. They made available their Cayman Islands operation. And basically, you paid the money into an account in Mexico. It was then transferred immediately to another account in the Cayman Islands where it's held in dollars. And then you're free. Then you have access to the entire banking financial world. You can do anything you like with a dollar account from the Cayman Islands. And in 1 year, I think it was, 60,000 accounts were opened at HSBC Mexico's Cayman Island branch. There never was a branch. There was never bricks and mortar. There was no front door saying HSBC Mexico, nothing. It was all being done on screen in Mexico City. But 60,000 accounts were opened and they held $1.2 billion in cash. And, it doesn't take a genius to think. And by the way, the people owning these accounts all came from addresses in northern Mexico where apparently when they were filling out their forms to, what do you do for a living, most of these people were literally growing melons and avocados in their backyards. Yet somehow they were depositing loads of money.
I got to get into the melon business if that's the kind of money it generates.
Yeah.
So there's a quote, you mentioned Scarface earlier, and there's a scene in Scarface where Tony Montana, played by Al Pacino, is meeting with his banker, and Tony is asking for better terms. And the banker replies, "We're a legitimate bank. The more cash you give me, the harder it is to rinse." So you can see how this could start on a local level in some Sinaloa branch. But at a certain point, there's no plausible deniability at a corporate level. And since HSBC Mexico had processed $16 billion in U.S. cash deposits in 4 years, there's a point at which HSBC has to be aware that they have a problem on their hands. Was there someone in compliance sounding the alarms in London?
Yeah, repeatedly. You mentioned the film Scarface, but actually a film that in a way sums up what actually occurred was Apocalypse Now, Heart of Darkness, where in Apocalypse Now you've got Marlon Brando, Kurtz, doing his own thing in the jungle, and the American military have to bring him to an end.
Terminate with extreme prejudice.
Extreme prejudice, yeah. But what that's about is a guy who's a long way from the center, who's not being controlled, beyond control. And that's what happened here. The headquarters were in London. While Chapo was laundering his money, while they were acting as a massive laundromat for the Sinaloa, the bank was still intent on becoming the biggest bank in the world. And that meant it had to be buying things, and they were a lot bigger than Bital. In the United States, it bought Household, which was a huge consumer lending credit card business. That from memory, they paid $14 billion for that. They bought banks in Argentina, in Brazil, right across the world. So the management, and they also set up or grew their own investment banking operation, because you don't get to be the biggest bank in the world if you can't rival JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs on the investment banking side. So they were doing all this. The amount of activity at the top of HSBC in this period was huge. There were warnings, and they were going up the pipe, but they only got so far. And